You need to understand something about the Blue Ridge Parkway before this story makes sense. Because the Appalachian Mountains don't give warnings the way you'd expect. They don't rumble, they don't crack, they just wait. In May of 2016, along a back road spur off the Blue Ridge Parkway near Milepost 339 in Virginia, a family of 4 drove off the main route into a campground that doesn't appear on any map the state of Virginia has ever published. A father looking for a shortcut. A mother who noticed something wrong before anyone else did. 2 kids who will never forget the sound of knocking at 2 in the morning. By the end of that trip, the father filed a report with the Floyd County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who took his statement said, and these are the deputy's exact words, there'd been other calls from that area. He didn't say how many. The father's name is Garrett Hollis. He's 44. He lives in Roanoke. What happened to his family in those woods is the kind of thing that doesn't go away, not because it's dramatic, but because it's specific. The details are too strange to have been invented and too consistent to have been misremembered. Garrett told this account once to the sheriff's office, and once more, years later, on a camping forum post that received no replies. This is what he said. Garrett had been planning this trip for 6 weeks. Printed reservation, laminated trail map, a handwritten packing list that included the specific brand of bug spray his daughter Iris wasn't allergic to. He'd built his drive around the check-in window, 3 to 6 p.m., with a 45-minute buffer. He worked as a shift supervisor at a plastics plant in Salem. 2 years back, during layoffs, his name stayed on the roster while Gary Pell, longer tenure, 2 kids in high school, wife on disability, got a termination envelope on a Thursday. Garrett wasn't the one who made that call. But he was still there Friday morning, and that weight had never left his chest. This trip had to be good. He left Roanoke at 9:14 a.m. The parkway ate his buffer in 22 minutes. Brake lights as far as the road bent. A motorcycle group stacked in the right lane. A minivan crawling while someone photographed every overlook. 1 lane each direction, no shoulder, no alternate route. Evelyn hadn't spoken in 12 minutes. Theron's game battery 11%. Then Garrett saw the gap. Left side of the road. A break in the tree line. Narrow, unpaved. A gravel 2-track running back into the hardwoods at a slight angle. Not on his map, but fresh tire tracks pressed into the soft shoulder at the entrance. Recent tracks meant passable. Passable meant forward. His body made the call. He checked the mirror and turned. Garrett, Evelyn said. Someone was just here. It'll come out the other side. She looked at the tracks, said nothing. The gravel ran a 1/4 mile through second-growth hardwood and opened into a clearing. A hand-lettered sign nailed to a hickory. Caulfield Campground, 1 mile. Garrett had never heard of it. Not in 6 weeks of research, but it was a mile down a road he was already on, and Meadowbrook was 30 miles back through the same traffic. He kept driving. From the back seat, Theron said, "Dad, the GPS stopped." Not lost signal. Stopped. A spinning wheel where the map used to be. Garrett looked at it once, then back at the road, the trees closing in on both sides. He didn't look at it again. Caulfield Campground existed. That was the first thing. It was real. 8 cabins in a loose horseshoe off a gravel main lane, a fire ring area, a small barn converted into an office, a hand-lettered rate sign by the entrance, a single floodlight on a wooden post already burning at midday for no apparent reason. The man behind the counter was Earl Pruitt, 70s, dry build, the kind that comes from decades of outdoor work rather than exercise. He moved at one speed, slightly slower than whatever you expected, and he did not offer a welcome. He set a laminated card on the counter before Garrett had finished saying his name. The smell of the office hit Evelyn first. She stepped back just one step, the way you do when something registers below the level of a conscious decision. Pine resin, old wood, and underneath both of those, something cold and faintly biological, like a fireplace that had been used to burn something other than wood a long time ago, and never fully cleaned out. Earl read the rules aloud, not as a formality, as a recitation, the way a man reads something he has said so many times the words have worn grooves into him. No campfires outside the designated ring. Do not disturb the white ash boundary around Cabin 9. If you hear knocking after dark, do not open the door. Lock it. Do not go out after dark. Garrett almost laughed. He looked at Evelyn, who was not laughing. "What is it? Bears," he said. Earl looked at him for a long beat. The floodlight outside buzzed. "It ain't bears." He didn't elaborate. He turned back to the register. The register was a pale green ledger, entries in different handwriting going back decades. Garrett scanned it while Earl wrote, not reading carefully, just the idle scan of a man waiting. The most recent entry was 3 weeks prior. Dalton/Fenn party. 4 persons, cabin 7. No entry for cabin 9 anywhere on the page. He didn't think much of it at the time. He would think about it later. The laminated rules card had 6 rules on it. Earl had read 4 of them. The other 2 were covered by a strip of electrical tape pressed flat and deliberate, edges sealed down clean. Garrett saw it. He didn't ask. Cabin 9 was a mile from the cluster. That was the first wrong thing, so not frightening, just logistically strange. No campground operator puts one cabin a mile from the others. No camper requests that. The distance had no economic logic and no practical explanation. The second wrong thing was the smell when they stepped out of the Explorer. Cold ash, like a dead fire, but the smell came from the ground. From the foundation line itself. The white ash boundary ran the entire perimeter of the cabin. Foundation line, front step, both window sills, every corner point. Not scattered, placed, packed thick and deliberate the way a person lays something down when they understand that gaps will matter. Evelyn said, "Pest deterrent, maybe." Theron said nothing. He was looking at the tree line. Iris from the back seat in the flat tone of an 8-year-old stating a fact. "It looks like something's supposed to stay inside it." No one corrected her. Garrett carried the bags in. Moving through the front room, he noticed the interior side of the door, long horizontal scratches at roughly 4 feet of height, worn through the paint down to bare wood. He filed it as wear. Old cabin, years of use. The scratches ran parallel, evenly spaced, the kind of pattern that comes from something pressing against a locked door, repeatedly, over a long time. He didn't look at them again. The landline was a rotary phone mounted to the kitchen wall, a card taped beside it with the office number in block letters. That was the only connection they had to anyone. Cell service was gone. The GPS was still spinning. Checkout was Sunday morning, 8 a.m. It was Friday afternoon, one full night ahead. Garrett set his bag down and looked out the window at the tree line. The tree line looked back. The first night passed without incident. Saturday evening, the temperature dropped to 42 degrees. The kids ate dinner. Evelyn read. Garrett sat with the fire going in the cabin's box insert, enough wood stacked beside it for the night, and he told himself the trip had been salvaged. The cabin was warm. Iris had stopped asking about the ash line. Theron had found a deck of cards in a kitchen drawer and was running solitaire on the table with the focused patience of a kid who had made his peace with no signal. It was fine. It was going to be fine. That was the restlessness talking, the same nervous system that turned him off the parkway, the same one that kept him up at 3 a.m. on workdays running through plant schedules that weren't due until Monday. His body did not know how to trust quiet. It kept scanning for a problem to solve, a gap to close, something that required managing. Sitting still while things were fine felt to Garrett like a specific kind of failure. He told himself the firewood stacked inside was going to run short overnight. He had noticed deadfall at the tree line 30 yards out. A downed oak, branches already dry. 2 minutes. He'd be back before Evelyn looked up from her book. He did not reach for his coat. He stepped over the ash line at the front door. The moment his boot came down on the far side of the ash, smearing it, opening a gap 3 inches wide, the forest went silent. Not quiet, silent. The insects cut out. The mountain laurel at the edge of the clearing had been moving in a light wind for 2 solid hours. It stopped. The cold sharpened, not the ambient cold of a May night at elevation, but directed cold, the kind that radiates from a source. Gravel under his boots sounded too loud in the absence of everything else. Garrett's father had spent 30 seasons hunting these ridges. He had a specific thing he said about woods that went quiet. All at once, everything at once. He said there were only 2 reasons it happened: wind change or company. And when it happened like that, all of it together, he said it wasn't the wind. Garrett was halfway to the tree line when Theron appeared in the doorway behind him. "Dad." Not a question, not frightened exactly. Something past frightened, the specific flat tone of a kid who has already processed what they're seeing and moved straight to practical action. "Come back, right now." Garrett turned to say he was fine. 2 oaks at the edge of the clearing, close together, 40 yards out, something standing between them. He could not tell you the shape of it. He could not tell you the height. What he could tell you, what he told the deputy, word for word, was that the arms hung lower than arms should, that the head was canted at an angle that was wrong, the way something in a dream is wrong, not broken, just wrong in a way the eye keeps sliding off of, that the darkness around it bent toward it rather than away. It wasn't moving. It wasn't looking at him. Or maybe it was looking at him. The head angle made it impossible to know, which was somehow worse than either option. Every muscle in Garrett's back contracted at once. His bowels went cold. He did not run. Running would have required his legs to work, and they had switched to a different signal entirely. The ancient one that says, do not move. Do not become a moving thing. Do not give it a direction. He backed toward the cabin. Theron grabbed his arm the second he was in reach and pulled him through the door. Garrett locked it. He looked down at the threshold. The ash line, 3 inches of gap where his boot had smeared through it on the way out. He had nothing to repair it with. He stared at the gap for a long moment, then at the door, then at the gap again. Outside, the forest was still completely silent. It started at 11:47 p.m. 3 knocks. Not a fist. Something harder. Something that wrapped around the door frame rather than struck it flat. The vibration carried through the cabin floor and into Garrett's heels before his brain named what it was. 1, 2, 3. Then silence, then 3 more. Evelyn had moved Iris into the bathroom the moment Garrett came back inside. No discussion, no plan. Pure instinct, the kind a mother runs on before the thinking brain catches up. Door locked, Iris under the bed with a pillow over her head. Theron was against the back wall of the main room, one hand resting on Garrett's arm. Not gripping, just present. The contact of a kid who has decided staying close is the most useful thing left to do. The fire had burned to coals. The temperature inside was around 40 degrees. Garrett was at the landline before the second set of knocks finished. He dialed the office number from the card on the wall. The ringtone came back clean, line was live, and Earl Pruitt did not answer. Garrett dialed again, 4 times, steady and perfect every time, and Earl did not pick up. Standing there with the receiver pressed to his ear and the knocking coming in measured 3-count intervals from 6 feet away, Garrett understood something he hadn't let himself think clearly until now. Earl had known this was going to happen. The laminated card, the recitation, the electrical tape over the last 2 rules, none of it was a warning. It was a record of what had already happened to someone else, written down so the next person would have it. He stacked the kitchen chairs against the door, then the table, then himself. The smell in the room by midnight, cold water and something metallic, like a handful of old nails left out in the rain. No source, simply present, not drifting in from outside, but already there, as if the cabin walls had just stopped holding it back. The knocking did not escalate. That was the detail, not the sound itself, what the sound refused to do. It didn't get louder, didn't get faster, didn't shift to the window or work its way around the walls. 3 knocks, silence, 3 more, each interval identical. The patience of something that had done this before and understood that patience was sufficient. That waiting was the whole method. It wasn't trying to force the door. It was waiting for someone to open it. It knew about the gap in the ash line, and it was doing what it had always done, because it had already learned that waiting worked. 1 a.m. 2. Theron had stopped touching Garrett's arm and sat against the back wall with his knees pulled up, watching the door handle with the hollow focus of someone who has burned through fear and come out the other side into something colder and quieter. Garrett did not sit. He stood between his son and the door and did not move, still and upright, absorbing something he hadn't caused and couldn't fix, the way he had stood in the plant parking lot on Friday mornings for 2 years. 3 a.m. The coals went gray. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees. Evelyn had not made a sound from the bathroom. Iris had not made a sound. That silence was the worst thing in the room. 2 people doing the only thing available to them, which was wait in the dark and not make themselves known. At 4:52 a.m., the knocking stopped. No footsteps pulling back from the porch. No gravel shift. No branch snap. Nothing moving away into the trees. Just cessation, like a switch thrown. Garrett stood at the door for a long time without moving. When gray light pressed through the window, he moved the table aside, then the chairs, then himself, and opened the door 1 inch at a time. Cold morning air came through the gap, sharp pine and ash. The exterior face of the door had fresh marks on it, 4 feet of height, horizontal, parallel, the same marks as the inside. He stood on the threshold and looked at them, and what moved through him was not fear. Fear had gone out around 3 a.m. What moved through him was recognition. The interior scratches he'd noticed when they arrived, the ones he'd filed as wear. They weren't wear. They were a record. Something had stood on this same porch before him, in an earlier version of this same night, and the ash line had held that time. This time Garrett had broken it himself. He stepped back inside and closed the door, looked at his son sitting against the wall. Neither of them said anything. Garrett packed the car in gray dawn without speaking. Evelyn recognized this, not the events of the night. Those she was still moving around carefully, the way you move around something hot. But this, the focused efficiency, the particular numbness in how he carried each bag to the explorer without meeting anyone's eyes. She had seen it before, after the layoffs, after Gary Pell. This was what Garrett looked like when something in him had closed off a room and locked the door from the inside. They drove out without eating, without speaking, without coffee. Garrett stopped the car at the campground office. Earl Pruitt was on the porch, standing there like he was expecting them, which Garrett realized he probably was. Earl looked at the car, then at Garrett, and he did not look surprised. Garrett got out, left the engine running, walked up to the porch. "We broke the ash," he said. Not an accusation, a confession. Earl nodded once. "I know." "What was it?" Earl looked past Garrett, not toward Cabin 9, but at the tree line at the far edge of the parking lot. The same automatic scan Garrett had already caught himself doing twice that morning and understood. Standing there, he would do for the rest of his life. Old as the land, been here longer than the road, longer than us. It don't want nothing particular. It just wants in. Why that cabin? Earl looked at him the way he'd looked at him when Garrett first signed the register. A specific recognition Garrett hadn't understood then. That cabin's the last one. It always finds the last one. No further explanation. Earl went back inside. That was the ceiling. The Floyd County deputy who took Garrett's report had the expression of a man who had heard the broad outline before and made his peace with not being able to do anything about it. He wrote everything down carefully. He didn't ask a single follow-up question. He said, "There have been other calls from that area." He did not say how many. Garrett drove home to Roanoke. He started placing a line of table salt along the threshold of every room he slept in. Not consciously at first. More like an instinct, the way you check that a stove is off without deciding to check. His body was trying to redraw the line he had erased. He never explained this to Evelyn. She didn't ask. 6 months after the trip, a forum post appeared in a regional hiking and camping community, username G_Hollis_VA, asking whether anyone had encountered a private campground off the Blue Ridge Parkway near Milepost 339, and specifically whether anyone else had noticed the white ash perimeter around the last cabin. He waited 3 weeks for a reply. None came. He deleted the post on day 22, then reposted it, then deleted it again. The thread no longer exists anywhere. The account is still active. In the Appalachian Mountains, the old things don't hunt the way you'd expect. They don't chase. They don't call out. They wait for you to make a gap. Garrett made one, not out of carelessness, but because his nervous system had spent 2 years looking for somewhere to set down the weight he had been carrying, and the mountains were there when he finally set it down in the wrong place. The detail I keep coming back to is the register. Entries going back decades. The name Earl Pruitt in the oldest handwriting and the newest. I have a theory about that, but I want to hear yours first.